And so what Lewis then argues for is that some people are more moral than you think because they were given bad cards, as we would say. They were given the wrong, or let's say worse, bad, again. They were given bad initial impulses or unnatural impulses, unnatural feelings towards things. So, for example, if someone is doing something good based on their station in life, that thing could be better or worse. He says that, someone who has really bad circumstances, perhaps even doing the tiniest little kindness, could be more moral than someone else laying down their life for someone else. And that's interesting, because then what he's basically arguing for is God can only judge, because God's the only one who can see what men are like. And God is taking realm number 1 and realm number 2. So you have realm number 1, which is that moral choice, and you have realm number 2, which let's say is the psychological substance that you have. And God is seeing, well, apart from number 2, which is what we factor into our morality, God sees only number 1. He only sees that first aspect. And so Lewis says that, when we're stripped down to only our souls at the end of time, there will be a lot of surprises, because someone who we thought was really good perhaps isn't as moral as we thought, because they were just dealt really good cards. And someone who we thought was really bad perhaps wasn't as bad as we thought that they were, because they were just dealt really bad cards. And so it's not really up to us to judge. But there's also another aspect of this, which is that we can bring about heaven or hell in our own circumstances, because we can make moral choices that then affect the psychological circumstances. That's the phrase that I'm going to be using, psychological circumstances that we're surrounded by. So I can bring the world around me into hell, let's say. I can bring everything else around me down, and then I can bring down those psychological circumstances in myself and in everyone else around me as well. But I could also make moral choices which are good, and then heighten the or give better cards, let's say, to the people around me and to myself to make better moral choices. And we see things differently than God does. And so that's part of the reason Lewis says why we can't judge as God does. And so I was led to this passage in James 4:11 through 12, which says, "Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and one judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor?" We don't see those circumstances that people are surrounded with. So, for example, if someone treats you really badly for whatever reason, maybe it's not an actual reason that they treat you really badly. Maybe they have something else that happened to them a long time ago, or maybe their own family has the same thing. We ought not to judge suffering because we don't see all the things that go into it. You could say, if you're a rational atheist type, this suffering which is imminent in the world, nothing could justify it. But who are you to judge? Who are we to judge as men? What only God can see, because we don't see the whole picture, and we don't see all of it. And we're all human, and we like to jump to conclusions, and we like to jump based on our feelings and our impulses and on what we think that we instinctually know. But we don't really know that much. And so maybe the best posture that we ought to have towards one another is one of caring for one another and loving one another. We all have people around us constantly who get on our nerves for one reason or another. But in a lot of ways, we don't know what they're going through, even if they're very close to us. And I think that this can be a real temptation, for example, like I was even saying within families. And like for me, it can be a temptation with my parents or my siblings because, these people are very similar to me, because I've lived with them my entire life. And it can be a temptation with parents because, these children are mine and I know them very well, but we don't really know each other that well. And we're all so distinct from one another, and we all have circumstances and situations that we can't even articulate in our own language, but that are, as Lewis says, subconscious, and as Freud or Jung would say, that are deep inside of our subconscious selves. And we don't really know what, in some sense, we don't really know what to do with that. And so the posture that we ought to act towards one another, as I said before, is with one of love and one of graciousness and one of caring for one another. Because We are not the judge.